Yes, we have about 25,000 black taxis in London, and now we have about 114 private hire vehicles that we know of. And the legal powers we have to cap private hire vehicles does not exist. We've been trying to get the power to do that, and the government have refused. The private hire vehicles, minicabs, have more than doubled in the last 3 years, and it is an unsustainable position, and it is something is causing us a lot of problem, and we are looking at it. In fact, one of the things we're considering is whether or not we remove the exemption from private hire vehicles to the congestion charge. But we have to do... But everything... You know, one of the differences between being opposition and in power is actually you suddenly have to start listening to the lawyers and doing things properly and getting your research, and, you know, so we're looking at it. Okay, this is not a decision. However, but it is a significant problem. And, you know, one of the difficulties I've got is that there's a lot of people who want to blame cycle lanes for congestion in London. That has definitely got into some people's brains. And in my mind, cycling is the most efficient use of road space in terms of people. And it is really important we fight this through in a positive way. So the Mayor's transport strategy, one of the things we're going to look at is how do we tackle this congestion issue that we've got, but we'll be doing it from the point of view of positive modal shift, and we're looking at a whole different lot of ideas for how we can manage it. So we'll watch this space. The schemes, we'll talk to you a bit, pick up on all of that, but I just want to say that the whole point of the Healthy Streets is that every scheme we look at, we're looking at it in the round. That is very, very important to us. More specifics on other schemes. So, you know, one of the ways we do this isn't just from TfL-driven, you know, schemes. It is very much about us getting the boroughs engaged and doing work through the boroughs. There will be there's a whole local implementation funding round going on at the moment, but I'll let Will talk about the schemes.
Great. Yeah, hi David. So in terms of new schemes, I know it's day 10. I'm not going to come out with some announcements right now, but I do have a series of meetings over the next few weeks looking at layering in all the different data that is there and looking at where the demand is at the moment and where that's going to come in. So I'm looking to look at, well, what is our methodology for coming up with new schemes going forward, working with colleagues across the board to drive those forward. So there is, you know, we have it on our agenda to look at where the new schemes are, but I don't want to just come in the day, you know, the first week in my job and say, hey presto, I want a new route from my house to City Hall. It is very much around looking at where the demand is, where the needs are, and what can make the most efficient use of public funds to drive that forward. So looking and pushing colleagues to see, well, what is the best methodology to do that and take it forward. Yeah. So, and then I think and these are not new schemes that are being announced, but certainly one of the two schemes that we're putting out for consultation this summer are CS9 and CS4. So one of those in the west and one in the east. So that is those consultations should be coming out in the summer, and I've been talking to colleagues in the first couple of days on how we can get those consultations out as soon as possible so we can get moving on those.
Good. Did you get Rita's question about
So I think that Rita, thanks ever so much. I think you mentioned two things. One was the women piece, and that obviously goes beyond just who's asking the questions. It's also who's on the roads. And I think we all know that the majority of cyclists on the road in London are men at the moment, and I think that some of the measures that we do need to put in place and make it more friendly and more and to reach out a much broader audience, not just in terms of gender, but also in terms of different culture and ages. There's a large domination of people on cycleways, myself included, as a particular age group and a particular gender. And I think that one of the things we need to do is broaden this out. But I think that's why the walking piece is so important in this. It is more inclusive. Not everybody wants to be a cyclist. Not everybody will be a cyclist. This is about how do we get more people to be active in terms of getting more people walking and reach out to that. So I believe that the healthy streets agenda and the indicators built within that work that Lucy led is all about how can we make sure the investments going forward drive a variety of different ways of being active in travel. I think in terms of your point around changing how do we look at schemes so that if it holds up traffic, is that going to be the big barrier? I think is something that is already happening. I've already sat in meetings where they actually, no, this is the priority to get people walking and cycling. Yeah, we have to think about travel in the round, we have to service the city, but our point is how do we push that forward? So it is no longer acceptable for that to be the only reason why schemes don't go ahead. And so I agree with you on that, and we're already seeing changes in that line.
Val wants to come on to some of those questions.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Ruth, I think there has been a backlash. There is backlash against cycling schemes, and I think one of the helpful things about the Healthy Streets approach is it says this is for all of us. This is something you will and should benefit from, and I think that's a very important message that we're trying to get out there.
Eugene, thank you very much for the invitation for the bike around the park. Someone's actually already beaten you to it, I'm afraid. I did go and have a look at CS11 and had a look at some of the, just seeing the gates and those sides as I went around. And I know Val is going to come back on exactly what the plan is on that.
The CS11 issue. In a way that was part of that, there's people very, very aggressive about the proposal, against the proposal to have a cycling scheme. CS11 from Swiss Cottage to the Royal Park the construction will start, I think, in the autumn. That is actually happening. That will happen. And the discussion we are moving ahead with the Royal Parks is basically when I looked at it, I looked at the casualty figures around the Royal Park, and that road has got a higher casualty rate, an accident rate, than other busy main roads in Westminster. The traffic around there is too fast, it's dangerous, it's very inappropriate, and the walking facilities the crossing facilities are appalling as well. It is not, in my view, the safest environment it could be by a very long way. So, what we've said is that while we're getting on with doing the construction from Swiss Cottage down to the park, we are going to use that time to talk to the Royal Parks about what would be a better scheme for the park itself. The default position is if we can't get a better scheme, then the gate closures will happen. If that's what we need to do, then that's what we will do. But it would be great to come up with an even better scheme. It would be great, for example, to see if we could get segregation. We certainly want 20 mile an hour. I want to talk to them about what we can do. The Royal Parks has had a change of board and a change of chairman, so I'm going in, I hope, to see Lloyd Grossman as the new chair of the Royal Parks. But it's not acceptable for a park in this day and age to have a road which is so fast and so dangerous and is so badly engineered. And I just think in a way they've kind of got the worst of both worlds, because they kind of say, well, this is a bit of the park and you can't treat it like a road. We don't want all this clunky engineering. On the other hand, people are driving there and there are accidents happening. So we've got to try and crack that one open.
Tom, in terms of targets, I couldn't agree more. We need, the ambition is really good in this. We have the targets at the moment of doubling the number of cycling journeys, but that is not until 2041. The mayor's but this is my point, that the mayor's transport strategy is setting a vision for a much longer time period, and I think then obviously as successes come in, we build on the successes that have been happening so far. We've seen big growth in cycling around London. I think what's interesting is the percentage of walking has remained broadly consistent at 24% over many years. So I'm keen to see how we push that forward as well and set those targets. But in my opinion, targets should always be up for review, and particularly up, always upwards. We shouldn't be rounding down on that. So, yes.
Great.
Okay. So the fundamental principle is the road user hierarchy is walking, cycling, public transport, and that is the order of priority. So we've now got the new Healthy Streets Board within TfL, which makes the decisions. So where there's an issue of priorities, in particular, there's been conflicts in the past with the buses, and the buses are important to us, and cycling schemes. We will use the bus priority money that we've put in the business plan, 23 million, to speed up buses further down the route, or use bus priority net mechanisms like jump-throughs, etc., to keep the buses moving. So the idea is that the bus priority gets planned in around the cycling and walking schemes to make sure that we protect the buses. But the fundamental principle is the road user hierarchy is for most of the roads in London is that walking, cycling, and there you go.
I don't actually have a huge amount to add from what Val said, but just to re-emphasise that issue around the priority of the pedestrians and the cyclists at the top of that hierarchy. I've already sat in meetings where that has come up in conversation, and there is a clear approach to prioritising that.
It will be a change.
Not on Islington Council's business. They prioritise public transport over cycling.
Okay.
You need to understand, I think, that one of the biggest issues for people who live in London, the residents, is traffic displacement. And I think we should be sympathetic about that issue, because people worry about schemes because they drive cars down their roads. So one of the things we're looking at is how do we tackle that and make sure we are not just moving the traffic to outside people's houses. And that is an important, something that I think is important to do. So traffic displacement is one of the things we're interested in doing. So it's how do you evaporate the traffic, how do you reduce the traffic, and how...
You put the bollard and they can't get through.
Sorry, I'm not quite sure why you're arguing with me on this one, because I'm trying to say that we have... that we totally get the point. I'm really disappointed, Peter, to hear you say that, because you're wrong. We are ploughing ahead with the Oxford Street pedestrianisation programme, but we have to work in partnership with the boroughs, and the borough is being incredibly helpful and sympathetic. And one of the things that you will have seen that we're doing is that we're having a consultation to remove some of those central London buses at the moment, which are basically going to become much more redundant because of the opening of the Elizabeth line, and we absolutely must have Oxford Street pedestrianised for the part opening of the Elizabeth line, as much of it as we can. This is a high priority project, and actually it's going really well. And I think you shouldn't assume that you win things by having punch-ups. There are ways of working with the boroughs that I think can deliver, and it is about actually being sympathetic to their democracy and their issues and looking at it a little bit more constructively. And I have to say, the first thing that the new leader of Westminster did was to impose a diesel surcharge on the car parking. So you need to, I think, give people a chance to actually come forward, because I feel that Westminster is taking some steps forward, and all of the educative pressures we're applying is actually making a difference. So when we're positively campaigning, I think we are bringing people, the councillors and the boroughs along with us. I think London has got a huge appetite for this change now, and I think the democratically elected representatives are going to be increasingly be getting the message. But looking for the fight first isn't the answer. Looking for the leadership and the positive scheme and the delivery is where we want to go.
Great, thank you, Christopher. Will, can I ask you to start off with Tom's question about walking?
Hi Tom, thanks ever so much for the welcome, and thanks for sort of re-emphasising that this is a big change, and I think the walking piece is really important on how we do this. I wouldn't have taken the job, I wouldn't have wanted the job if it was just cycling. It is a walking and cycling role. I think my first priority on the walking is to get people thinking about walking as a mode of transport, to get people thinking and talking about walking as part of their daily lives. That is a significant change. It hasn't been on the agenda in any significant way recently or before. So at the moment we're looking at, well, what is our strategy on this? What is the action plan? I think that there is an infrastructure piece on the walking around how crossings are designed, how streets are designed, which comes under the Healthy Streets umbrella. So thinking that through in terms of the indicators that Lucy and others have helped develop is going to be critical in terms of thinking through all our schemes, but also working across. I think one of the pieces that comes out of the Healthy Streets Network document is that this is a network approach. This is not just thinking about a single street being healthy, but about how do we work across all the different modes of transport. So talking to the underground about how the way that their stations are designed could help flow people out to walk rather than necessarily change tubes. And so driving that across the whole TfL and transport network is going to be up there. But I don't have the plan yet. The plan at the moment is to make sure there is a plan.
And let's go to Val just on the Development Corporation question.
Yeah, the whole point of trying to institutionalise the Healthy Streets approach in policy and decision making within TfL is so that every time they are looking at a regeneration plan, opportunity area framework, schemes like the Old Oak Common, that this methodology is applied in there, and it's been very, very visible and very high profile within the GLA now. So, I can't tell you exactly what we're going to do right now for Old Oak Common, but as the plans are looked at, this is actually in the mainstream approach.
And just Jamie's point about areas like Leighton and
expanding
the Cycle Hire scheme. Okay, right at the moment we haven't got any plans to expand the Cycle Hire scheme. It's an expensive capital programme to do that, because you have to intensify not just the new area but then back into the middle of London. However, if the boroughs come to us and say they want to do it and are willing to put some money in, then that's something that we can look at. It's also something that Section 106 money, so planning gain money, can help with. So there are ways of carrying on.
Great.
Hi David. In terms of getting kids cycling and making sure it's safe for them to cycle, I couldn't agree with you more. I think both my kids cycle in London and recognise some of the challenges that you mentioned in terms of that. So I think there's the training aspect of that, but there is also making sure that there are safe environments for them to do that. So I think there are a couple of things as we look at the Livable Neighbourhoods programme that comes out, making sure that there are more that reaches out into residential areas and other areas to make sure there is safety. So I think if we can get kids cycling and making sure that there's a presence in schools, that schools have active travel plans and those sort of things, it's really supportive of that whole of things. John, I couldn't agree with you more about making sure that the cycle superhighways continue to be a priority and continue to be an important part or a critical part of London cycle network, along with the quiet ways and other routes. But in terms, I think your point around the businesses is really important here, and the business support for this, both in terms of making the case, and I know there are a lot of big businesses that are really interested in this and supportive of it, but in terms of that active travel, in terms of productivity, and in terms of building that into people's lives, businesses are beginning to recognise that here and around the world, but also in terms of small businesses, the benefits that come from having the Healthier Streets approach in terms of greater footfall and greater spend in terms of local businesses, I think are really critical. So I think that there are issues around very vocal members of communities opposing things. I think that the evidence that I've seen shows that the majority of people do want to see this happen. They might not necessarily be as vocal as some of the opposition.
Great, thank you.
Val's going to pick up on the freight question, okay? Val.
Yeah, freight and light goods vehicles are one of our biggest problems in terms of growing traffic congestion overall. And we're looking in the Mayor's Transport Strategy that's just coming up and in the local implementation plan to try and find ways of reducing that. Clearly there are some very good models already around some of the business improvement districts where they do consolidation type schemes. And we're looking at what mechanisms we can use. Certainly we've been dealing with protecting wharves around the river to make sure that we can carry on using the river as much as we can for spoil and construction waste. and I'm very interested in how we can find ways of transferring deliveries into bikes and pedicab type vehicles and electric vehicles, and we will be looking for ideas in the Mayor's Transport Strategy to do that and putting some funding behind it.
Great.
To the invitation, yes. But also, I think in terms of reviewing the junctions, certainly, I think that's really important. You mentioned the Lambeth one, and I'm aware that there is a temporary solution that's going in at the moment, and it's one of the ones I want to have a look at and work with the colleagues at TfL and wider stakeholders to improve the longer-term solution to that space. So clearly, as I said earlier, the events of last week and other previous road deaths are unacceptable on London roads, and it's something that we need to take very, very seriously. There was a Franz. Sorry, I'm going to skip from Franz, and I'm going to take Nicola's point around staying indoors. I think the emissions piece and the air pollution issue is a really serious one in London. It hasn't been in the news until really the last few years. It's really surged up in terms of importance, and so. One, I'm delighted that we're seeing that the T-charge is coming in, so we're beginning to charge for the most polluting vehicles and looking at the low emission zone coming in further than that. But in terms of not being active during times when there are high levels of pollution, all the evidence shows that the benefits of activity outweigh the dangers around the air pollution, unless for particular vulnerable groups, so particular groups of older people, asthmatics, and other things. So I think it is right that we're putting those warnings out to make sure that people can make their own decisions on this. But I think the overarching message should be that those people who are polluting should be the ones who pay for this, and that should be the way that we tackle this issue going forward. And it isn't about people not being active during those times. It is about how do we reduce the pollution that's affecting everyone in London.
So have car-free days like they do in Paris and elsewhere in Europe.
Thanks, Nicola. Val, last answer.
Yeah, I guess apologies for this. One of the reasons why we've been doing the alerts is because we do need people to support what we are doing on the toxicity charge, which starts in October this year for pre-2006 vehicles, for the ultra-low emission zone, which will be 2019, and which will be for the whole of London for heavy goods vehicles and buses and coaches, for example. These are pretty radical measures. And it's been great that we're actually getting support for them. Car-free days, we've just re-established the major events committee, and we will be looking at more street-type events in London. But what we really want to do is to actually have a focal point, so it would be something like a cycle event plus side activities, so that when people come to London or in London, there's something going on that they can enjoy at the same time.
We're not talking events, are we? We're talking days when people...
No, we're talking days when you close the road and you have some kind of event, a market, some cultural activity. So that's actually what we're talking at the moment. So, I'm sorry. I think if we have car-free days, it's great to have something going on as well to encourage people to come and enjoy. And I'm not quite sure. Perhaps you can explain what the problem is with having some kind of cultural activity or social event or music going on when you're having a car-free day, because that seems to me to be a great thing, because it encourages people to come and use the space.
Which means when there is an episode of high pollution, you ban cars for that day. So car-free days planned are great, and we welcome them and welcome the cultural activities, but when there's high pollution days, you just say no cars.
Okay, and what we're hearing in the room is a difference of view on that. So it's great. We're hearing it slightly.
We all agree.
We agree. What the panel is saying is different.
And we're allowed to disagree. We're allowed to have points of difference. But thank you for making clear your points of view. Val, have you got anything more to say on any of those points?
Well, I would just say to you that Paris has got a very different profile in terms of the traffic that goes into centre of Paris. we have a big problem with lorries and heavy goods vehicles and vans in London, and that is a lot of the diesel particulates that we have. The science isn't behind what you're saying in terms of, actually having car bans for London. We certainly haven't got the public transport capacity to carry everybody at this stage, and what's one of the things that we're working on. We will, and the charging program that we've put in place, which we've modelled, which we are going to put in place, actually does deliver the cleaning up of London's air. It does clean it up, and I just think it is important that we've got a legal framework that we've got to work within London. And it's also really important that we don't push people back to petrol. We actually need to transform what people are driving around or how they're moving around to get the difference.
You get on bicycles, that's why we're here.
Okay, thank you. There are going to be more talks and evenings like this in the series of street talks. If you've got an idea, sounds like that last question might be an idea for a future debate, go on Twitter. Go not to Val Shawcross's email address, by the way. Although you could do, but she might take a while to reply if you all send her an idea. But go to Sustrans London on Twitter. Just send them your idea about what you'd like a topic to be at a future talk. I want to ask you all a question. How are you getting home? Hands up who is predominantly going to walk home. Thank you. Hands up who is predominantly going to cycle home. That's me too, sorry. And hands up who's predominantly going to take public transport.
Sorry, can you actually do the prices of public transport and buses? I really think buses...
Buses are public transport.
I know, but it's a huge difference, I think.
I'm not going to go into types of buses, sorry. And is anybody going to drive a privately owned car home? Good, didn't think so. It's a bit like hands up if you're a Trump voter. Anyway, we have been filming this evening, just in case you wanted to relive it. I know I will be. And it'll be available on the Sustrans website in about a week.
Yes.
Marvellous. So if you want to go on there next week and Nicola, you might want to watch your question all over again. If you want to have a chat with each other, with some of the panel, do stay for a drink at the bar over there. It'd be nice to stay and chat. Thanks very much for coming. Thank you to the 18 people who asked questions, but thanks also to Val and to Will for answering them. Have a good evening. Thank you.